have I ever told you the 2 times I did stand up?
I don't even know about that.
Okay.
I do want to hear.
So I did it twice. Twice in my life have I done stand up. The first time was at a bar called Ben's Half Yard House, and I don't know if you know what a half yard house is, but it is an establishment, a purveyor of alcohol that sells beer by the half yard. So you get this big glass pill. It's the stupidest thing ever to do because it's giving people copious amounts of alcohol.
Mike, what's a yard? Can you help me out with that one?
It's what you put.
Like a couple of 3 feet. A yard?
3 feet is 1
yard equals 3 feet.
Okay, but what's a foot? You also use feet.
Guys, it's almost
about
exactly
half the
the
height
same.
of a adult man.
Okay, got it.
It's a yard.
Wow, that is ridiculous.
Let's just editorialize. Yes, the half meter house. Thank you. You beat me to it.
But it's a full meter. It's just shy of a meter.
Got it. Thank you.
So
it's the 98% meter house.
98% meter house. So you go to this place and they give you copious amounts of alcohol, and they put it in this very delicate vase that is handled by a
very tall and thin.
A tall, thin vase.
Doesn't the Yard House do this down like by LA Live, like where E3 is? Don't they do that same thing there?
But they're probably smart enough to put them in like plastic things that like a toddler can handle.
Well, yeah, probably.
This was glass. I mean, so many of them were broken. But anyway, this was across from the studio where we recorded our first album. So we were over there a lot. And one night we were there and we were drinking too much. And it was open mic night for comedians. And so they were doing these stand-up, and we were right there at the stage. Now, I had enough of these half yards in me to feel just wildly critical and very vocal about it. So I'm sitting there at the front, and this guy he's dying. I mean, it is so bad what he's doing. He's trying, but he's not good. And I'm just sitting there shaking my head, and he decides this is the moment in his set where he should do some crowd work. And he looks to me, and he goes, "What, buddy? You think you could do better?" And I just looked up at him and I said, "Brother, it wouldn't take much." Oh. And the whole audience goes, "Oh," and he hands the mic over to me. Now, anybody in their right mind would have gone, "Oh, no." But I took that as, "Oh, this is my cue." Grabbed the mic from him,
jumped up on stage. This is going to be what makes me a star.
I mean, this is my shot. And I just went off. And I started just rambling about whatever. And I did like walk in, and I did just, it was when we were invading Iraq. That tells you the time that we were doing this. It's like, there's one person that we should send over there right now. And that's Christopher Walken, because Christopher Walken would negotiate in the best way possible. People, ha.
So you did well.
Comes up to me and he goes, I want you back here. You've got 8 minutes or whatever the designated time for a first stand-up comedian is. And we'll see you next week. And so I was like, "You bet, buddy. I'm just going to go throw up in your bathroom real quick." And so I came back the next week and I was like, "Here we go." And I got up on that stage and I bombed. I mean, I was awful. I was the worst comedian to ever step foot on a stage. And I was like, this is why I can't do stand-up.
Unless you're drunk and full of arrogance.
And I could do it once, right? So like that's a fluke. Anybody can be funny once, but a stand-up, a comic, and I've got friends that are really professional comedians. And what makes them so good is they've given their lives over to this, and it is a true art form, and they can do their set, it'd be terrible or awesome, and they get in their car and they drive down the road, and the next night or the following night, they do another set to a completely different crowd, and they're consistently funny, and they can do it time and time again, and that's what I don't have in me. But those are my 2 times that I've ever done.
I've done it once, and I feel like it went very well. It was a great time. It was recorded, and I think it'll be published in the next few months. However,
is this at RTX?
Yes, it's cheating. So because it was at RTX, everyone in the crowd knew who I was, and that means that I have no idea if any of that would work on anyone else, because they already know you as a person. The vibe is really positive. They really want to see you. They're going to laugh at anything.
For you, right?
Yeah. Like if you do a panel at a PAX, people will laugh at any bad joke because they're just so stoked to be there. So I was like, I actually have no idea if that was good or not.
However, I would say that
if Troy had been drinking in the audience, you would have gotten some candid feedback.
I would say that credit goes to Nick Scarpino, because he framed that night well. It had nothing to do with doing stand-up. It had everything to do with people. It could have been like a rock wall in a gym. It was, hey, here's an opportunity for you guys to get up here and be brave, and we are going to support you, and you're working with a net. We're owning the fact that everybody in this room is going to be effusively, incredibly supportive of every
Is this
every
the one
joke
that was
you tell is gonna be
filmed
funny.
for Rooster Teeth for that documentary they did, right?
No, this was
Scarpino.
the one that I did. At least was after that. But yeah, Nick does have a history of like organizing stand-up stuff for RT, basically.
Was
Yeah.
it not Rooster Teeth who did like a documentary of Scarpino's? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
That's
real,
quite
and
fun,
by the
actually.
way, it's a great doc. It's chronicling his the diligence and dedication that he had to getting his first set up at that club in San Francisco. But he, at RTX last year, has he done it other times, or was this the first
Twice,
time they
I
did it? Was
think.
it twice? Okay, so it's kind of funny stand up night,
Yeah.
and like James and Elise Willems gets up there, and Alanah gets up there. Who else got up there?
Blaine did.
Blaine got up there.
Um,
It was a funny night, but it was the size of the crowd was great, and again, it was a hot, sweaty. That was like a great. There is a certain. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. I apologize,
No, you're
but
fine.
You're giving us our first cold open.
This is all in the show.
Yeah, I do have to
This
keep
is-
all this in the show.
This is all we're this is all going in.
I'm walking down 6th Street during RTX, and I just had this. I don't know if you've ever been in a place where every kind of bit of your senses is being activated somehow by
Mhm.
some external thing. And it was the smell, the sound, the sensation, the air, everything. And I was like, man, I am in my 20s right now. Like this is how I spent so many weekends in my 20s as a musician, driving down from Dallas, going to Austin, talking about being in front of a non-supportive audience because everybody in Austin was like, fuck Dallas bands, go home. Because Dallas had their music scene and Austin had their music scene, and they were the rivals. But going in there and playing those clubs, and there was just such a palpable sensation of that summer Texas air that like immediately took me back 20 years.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I've always wanted to DJ in Austin just because I feel like it would be a really fun city to do that in, but never found the time. Anytime that I visited, it's always like now it's like less than a day. I mean, you know, Troy, it's like sometimes you fly in to do something for Rooster Teeth and then leave as soon as it's done the same day. Like they're
Yeah,
really
I
quick
did.
about it. It's hectic, but I don't know. I like Austin.
Aw, well,
Speaking
thank
of
you. I like
which,
I like Austin too.
Speaking of which, what a great segue.
welcome to Play Watch Listen. This is our first cold open, but we are keeping that in the show. So thanks for
Heck yeah,
listening
man.
to our stand-up bit. I'm Alanah. I am joined by Austin Wintory, video game composer, Troy Baker, video game actor, and Mike Bithell, video game director. How y'all doing?
Man, so good.
Great.
I'm enjoying hearing Troy's rise and fall from
As a stand-up.
stand-up grace. Yes, exactly.
I think I intentionally
I
had
like
a
that
few
the
drinks
audience
before
got to
I went
see
on.
the kind of. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just like,
I like that the audience gets to see the same kind of rambling kind of conversation we always have before we. Like, I feel like the bit that we release is always like the 1 hour in the middle when we remember to talk about video games.
Yeah.
No,
And
last
the
week
stuff
was
either side's
especially.
fun.
I think last week we literally recorded an entire hour episode after finishing that was not officially an episode because
complete accident.
we had a full conversation that could viably have been one of these, and then was like, oh shit, we should
Oh,
have
we
just
did.
kept
I
it
think it was
going.
about games as well, wasn't it? I
Yeah,
can't
no,
remember
it-
which one, but it was.
absolutely.
I kind of wish that was our format. Like, just someone said, "Well, I don't know. That's what you're supposed to do with a turkey." Hey there, guys. Welcome to. It's like everybody just wonders what the preceding conversation was.
That's right.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
I feel like we usually talk for like 20 minutes before we publish, and that's where stuff's NDA'd though. So suck on that,
that's the
everyone who's
NDA
listening.
zone.
It's true.
NDA zone.
It's true. All the top
Many
secret
secrets. I don't know if I ever
drunk
told you
stand-up
guys.
stories.
My best sort of. There are a couple of like things that I have never signed NDAs for that I'm holding on to that maybe at some point I'll talk about, like why Scalebound got cancelled. But
Ooh,
I
wanna
mean,
know that one.
yeah, it's fascinating. It's super interesting,
I
but
bet. I bet.
like a very large chunk of that is just in part that Platinum didn't think that they could make it, and Xbox pushed them to try to make a game on a specific engine, and Platinum did not have experience with that engine.
Oof.
Which is because I guess Microsoft wanted to have a portfolio of all of the different engines. And I believe it was Unreal, which is also what Dead Island was on, which never came
Yeah.
out. So the assumption I'm having is that maybe they struggle with open world games. I don't know. That's just one
wait a
small
minute.
part of the disaster.
Dead Island. What do you mean Dead Island didn't come out?
2.
Oh,
That trailer came out and was really good, and then the game never came out.
the jogging one?
Didn't
Is that what
Yeah.
you mean? The
Yeah.
jogging trailer?
That's right. It was
Those
like
guys,
LA, wasn't it?
man.
I don't think we've
Christ.
even heard that it was cancelled. It just kind of disappeared.
It just went away.
Yeah.
Wasn't the people, I want to make sure that I'm not telling you, maybe you guys can correct me on this. I thought that the people that did the trailer for the first Dead Island, right? The one of the best
famous
game
one,
trailers
yeah.
ever
Mhm.
made,
Yeah.
which was one of the worst game trailers that was ever made because it was not indicative of the game at all. Totally.
Yeah.
I got
visually-
a whole gripe about a whole spiel about that.
Yeah,
drives me
most
I wanted
people
to play
did.
that game though.
Yeah.
I really would have liked to have played
Oh
that
yeah,
game.
exactly.
That game would have
Yeah.
been incredible.
Yep.
Moving through the game
Yeah.
backwards like it was a Christopher Nolan movie or something. But and even like the person that did the music for that, like they got like a record deal. The people got like a deal from Lionsgate
No way.
who did the trailer for that. And I think I want to make sure that I'm not again telling tales out of school, but I think the people that did the trailer for that got a game based on the fact that they did that trailer, and it was a big game, like a AAA title. I was like, I don't know, they just gave us this game, so you should do this.
Wow.
But even like that's the best thing about Dead Island were those trailers. That jogging one was gay. The guy would just super upbeat running.
Yeah. They're
Oh,
really good
um,
trailers. I
such a good
First
trailer.
Dead Island was bad, right? Like I
First
feel
Dead Island
like
was bad.
that's what I remember, but then I also know I didn't finish it. So I
It was, also,
kind
it
of
was super campy. It was
Mm.
like this like romp, and the trailer gave it like this fucking beautiful. What was that
Yeah, it was
piece
like
of music?
heartbreaking. Yeah.
yeah.
Austin, who was that? Who was the composer for that?
I have no idea. I mean, there's so many people in the advertising world that operate
Giles
under.
Lamb. That's who it was.
There you go. Never
If we
heard
want to
that
get
name before.
demonetized real quick, we could play it.
That ruins
But
all
we
of
know
our
all about
elaborate
that.
Doesn't matter.
monetizing.
Yeah. You can
Yeah.
if you want. It's fine.
Myri Campbell, Peter Nicholson, and Guido di Sarducci. I don't know this guy's name. I don't know what else. Giles, do you know Giles Lamb and what he's done?
I mean, it's probably advertising people because there's a whole ecosystem of composers that do commercials, and they operate usually either through music libraries or what used to be called jingle houses, where people would be, marketing companies hired to produce an ad campaign. They get bids from like production companies. Those production companies have their own relationships with like either a full post house that will do all sound, sometimes also VFX, things like that, or just a music house that's like, hey, because what often happens is they'll say, look, we need 10 composers to each give us a bid. And so they'll get 10 versions, and then they'll have like 5 of those people iterate over and over and over and over as they narrow it down. So sometimes you'll do draft after draft after draft after draft and then be told, hey, we went with the other guy.
Do you get paid for any of the drafts?
Most of the time, yeah, the advertising world tends to, because it's like a known process that this is how they do it, there are paid demos. And so often it'll be like, we'll give you $1,000 for the demo process because it's going to be a lot of work. But then it's like 20,000 if you actually get the job. So it's a pretty substantial upgrade. I mean,
But
and I'm obviously drawing, people with more experience than me in that sector of the industry may correct. The numbers may not be accurate anymore either. I rarely dip my toes because I couldn't stand how the notes were so insanely granular. Every time I dipped my toes in advertising, they'd say, okay, so we really like, the music you have on this shot of like the close up of the hand, that's nice. I really feel that, I really feel like that's the hand. But then the next shot where it's a close up of like the car door, I feel like we're kind of off track there. And I'm like, those are 6 frames apart and it's the same note spanning both shots, right? Like it got so nitpicky every time that I just thought there are people that are wired for this better than me. Like I love feedback. I love, Mike can attest to this, Troy. Like
terrible to work with.
Yes, I know. I'm basically my attitude
he would just some of the words Austin used when I tried to give him just the simplest of feedback were just.
Yeah.
But it's funny because we've been through this process.
Go
recently,
fuck yourself is a valid response, Mike.
To feedback,
It is.
yeah.
Well, but the crucial thing, Austin, was you didn't tell me how to go further. Obviously, from a
You have to
feedback
make it a
perspective,
sandwich.
we'll
That
just
must
go,
be actionable.
we don't talk in outcomes, we talk in process, and that's how we achieve great things together. Troy knows this. But like, yeah, it's interesting going through the trailer process. Me and Austin just have, because this is coming out Friday, so we will have released a new trailer by then. Yay. For John Wick Hex. And like, the two things that I found really interesting in that process, one is, yes, going back to Austin's music and kind of re-engineering some of that. But the thing that's really interesting to me, specifically in the context like the Dead Island trailer, is that trailer houses are using engines now. Like in-house, they're using the game engine to make this stuff. And that's been the case for a while, but it's hitting a level of prestige and quality now that's incredible. They're not making pre-rendered stuff. They're literally booting up the game engine, grabbing our latest files, and working with stuff and kind of essentially working as developers. They're working alongside us on their version of the game that does all the cool things they want to do.
Is that so that there's less dissonance between the trailer that they're making and the game that they're trying to make the game trailer for?
Yeah, well, I think that's the creative reason. I think the production reason, bluntly, is it's cheaper because you can just work with what's there.
But you can basically shoot it in the game, right?
Exactly, but as a gamer, that's what I want. Like, I want trailers that represent roughly what I can expect in the game. Like, I appreciate you're going to set stuff up to look really great and cool, but where it gets interesting is you're getting this really interesting hybrid skill set now of these trailer guys who are in the trailer companies that we worked with on John Wick. We used AV Squad. They do all the John Wick trailers. They do all the Avengers stuff. Like, they're big Hollywood trailer house. But they have guys now who have come in from the trailer side, but now we're giving them game engines. And when you go to a trailer guy and say, you can choose what shots you make for a trailer, it's like their eyes light up with the possibilities of that, right? Because they're used to just kind of working with like, here's the 5 VFX shots that are finished.
Yeah.
Here's the shot where Robert Downey Jr. looks grizzled and has an opinion loudly. And like, you have to make something out of those parts. Now they're just kind of going, I want a shot where the camera flies past this and zooms and it can go too far for sure, but also you can kind of have these really kind of creative conversations. I'm game trailers weirdly is a very exciting area right now. I think it's going to be some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I would have thought they were extremely controlled. That like trailers are thought about for 6 months, because I have no idea how that process works when it comes to actually advertising the thing. I know how preview builds tend to work a lot of the time. Like, for example, the last preview event I actually went to in person, and probably the last one I'll go to for the next year, was Baldur's Gate 3. And that was, they were like, this is the only part of the game that works. That is genuinely it. We just have this part functioning, and we made sure it was functioning, so that's what we're showing you. And it was like, the part of it that they showed us was awesome. I really appreciate when previews are really candid about what's not working as well, because sometimes I like games are broken as hell. But trailers, I actually have no concept of how that comes together. All I know is the internet gets mad when the game doesn't look like the trailer, but often that's a lot more complicated than people think.
Like, that was like,
so much more complicated. It's not dishonesty. Usually, it's usually just a change in direction.
Yeah.
Mike, do you remember the trailer that for The Last of Us that came out? It was only in the UK because it was Ski or Sony UK that put it out, but the trailer was literally a live action trailer of a man growing a beard progressively.
I do remember this. Yes,
throughout the trailer. And then the log line or the tagline was, "Could you be the Last of Us?" And the guy transitioned, looked nothing like Joel, and then he went, it was like me, and then all of a sudden it was Joel's face. And I was like, so the messaging from this game is that you'll grow a beard playing this game. It's like,
well, it was also, I think it was placed, wasn't it? In like, there was at that point the bigger kind of PlayStation marketing, which I think it is still, which is kind of like live another life in a game, right? So like you become the character you're playing as. Like, there are a lot of trailers
I'm
on
sure
that
high
theme,
level
I feel.
was
Like PlayStation was.
Yeah, I feel like PlayStation does their like live multiple lives thing. I feel like that's the
yeah, like I mean that was I think they started that like in, was it PS2 era? They started that, but that's always been kind of a vibe, and I think it was kind of tied to that. I don't know if that's more of a European messaging than an American messaging.
They did have
which might be why that trailer was
during
specific.
the PS3. I remember shortly after, I think it was maybe Uncharted 1 or 2 came out, they had an ad campaign that was like a recurring sort of character, like the Verizon guy kind of a thing. They had like this guy where it was all about, my girlfriend's sitting on the couch and she thinks we're watching a movie.
I'm ready to watch the movie now, and he's playing Uncharted.
And they like had a recurring campaign built around this idea where it would barely show the game, basically.
I've never seen that commercial, so that's interesting. There's clearly like different,
Uncharted's a great game for that, though. Like, there are certain games that I've been able to play in front of my family. They like Wolfenstein. They really like the New Order. I played through the entirety
the visual
of
design in that is so good.
Yeah.
It's great to watch.
I love that game. I played through the entirety
Wolfenstein
of
or New
Until
Order?
Dawn with my mom, which was an awesome experience because we would often like pause the game and have heated deliberations about what we were going to do before continuing. It's honestly one of the
Love
best
that.
gaming experiences I've ever had. And then my favorite game was Deadly Premonition, and I think that's also my favorite game because I played through it in, I don't know, a 24-hour period with my best friend in Australia, and it was just like, who do you think committed this crime? Who do you think is doing this? So just constantly discussing those things. I love social gaming. Like, I played through Breath of the Wild that way too. At IGN, we had the game 5 days before everyone else, and I finished it in 3, I think.
Lord.
It was like 70 hours in 3 days or something.
That's a
Yeah, I was
lot.
going to say,
It
how's
was
that
maybe
even
not quite
physically
that
possible?
many. Yeah,
You
it
were
was
like
it was really hot. I wasn't sleeping.
You were
Like,
on
it
an
was tough.
IV and stuff.
Well, I had to get it done.
You were like
because I
in
was
South Park,
reviewing-
all the boys just sitting there, and it's like, Mom!
It was bad. I was reviewing 1-2 Switch, so I only had the Nintendo Switch console because I was reviewing 1-2 Switch, and I would have to give the Switch back to IGN as soon as I had reviewed 1-2 Switch. That was dropping the day the console came out. So I had a really small chunk of time to finish Breath of the Wild before I would not get to play it again because I couldn't afford a Switch at the time. So I just smashed through it, but it was awesome because it was me and 2 other people in the office were the only ones who had access to it. And we were playing it in a room where Jose, who was our lead reviewer, who now actually works at Nintendo, was playing it on a projector, and the other 2 of us were sitting there with our handhelds. And occasionally he'd just be like, "Don't look up," and he would like just do something that he didn't want us to see, which was usually if he was like further ahead than us on something really specific, or tell us to leave the room. But otherwise we were just like talking to each other about these shrines. And I wrote this really wanky article about how I feel like Breath of the Wild is a really good multiplayer game because a lot of the time you're talking to other people about like what you found or how you finished something or like what part of the map you're on. And it's just so social despite being a single player game. I feel like Uncharted's really good for that too. Actually, frankly, PlayStation does a lot of really good stuff like that.
Do you guys remember the trailer that came out? It was more of a, and Sony does this a lot, whereas PlayStation does this a lot. I should be more specific. They'll do just kind of like commercials for PlayStation, you know?
Yeah, that merge all their different IPs.
Yeah.
Right. The best one of that was the For Michael. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Oh my
Because
God.
it's weirder if you're called Michael.
Yes. There was it was everybody. There was a guy playing Nathan Drake. There was a guy that was playing Kratos. It was all of the characters like all in this bar together, and they're all recounting their war tales of when they were almost out.
It was
And
kind of like that
old.
old SNL thing of the like for what was the like for Grodowski? It was like a John Goodman bit of these guys sitting around drinking about this like mythical character that wasn't it kind of in that vein? Like
Yes,
they're
it
kind
was
of like
my
war
favorite guy was
buddies
like
together.
Omaha, lying on the beach. I thought I'd die, and he was one of the listeners who goes for Michael, and they're all like for Michael. I was like, that's a fucking great commercial, dude. Just for the experience alone of being like, because that's the way that I played ever since I was a kid. Like I playing with my GI Joes or Transformers or anything. The stakes were real for me when I was a kid. And that's why when I saw Tron, I was like, I knew it. I knew this shit was real. Like there are actual people inside this game. And when somebody dies, when I lose a life in a game, that guy dies. And so I played very intensely when I was a child.
That's gotta do some lasting damage, my dude. Like, that's a lot of pressure for a kid.
It stuck with me. I was like, I'm on my last life. It's literally my last life. It's like, I've cried before. I was like, I'm sorry. It's like, I fight for the users. I'm like, I let you down. Oh, such a nerd when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, do any of you have experience with like how trailers get put together? Because, this is talk to death in the industry, but for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, I do want to say, like, often if you see a game trailer and it doesn't end up looking like that on release, it is actually just that things change in video games during development all the time. At this point, at day one patches, people are making games up until the day that they come out. So often they aren't.
And after.
Yeah, actually, virtually every time. They're not trying to mislead you. If a puddle is bigger or smaller, it's because every time that you add a puddle, you have to take something else away. There's only a finite amount of space that you have. And you can't just keep adding puddles everywhere. And sometimes something else might be more important than that particular puddle. It's not that they're trying to make you think the game is full of puddles and take it all away. But I feel like a lot of people don't quite realize how unplanned game development is a lot of the time. I think it's like, they think that there's a finished product months beforehand. Like I've seen people this week be like, why don't they just release Final Fantasy VII? Australia already has it early because some places shipped it early to combat potential delays because of coronavirus. Like, why don't they just hit publish? Why don't you just make it the digital release happen now? And it's like, that's absolutely not how these budgets work. Like your whole quarterly earnings would be screwed if you just went on the wrong day. It totally doesn't work that way. Things are way more complicated than people think. But to
Making
circle
games
back,
is hard.
trailers. Do you guys know anything about how trailers are made? Like what is the process that goes into? I mean, Mike, I assume that you've made a handful yourself.
I have, but I'm kind of interested in what these guys' experience are more as people who probably have contributed to trailers, right? Both of you, I would assume, or have you not? Has it been kind of separated?
From my, I mean, I can be kind of quick in and out on this one because it's classic. It used to be that back in the day, a trailer, like in the movie, like in the 80s and early 90s, where before the whole idea of a trailer house was really kind of a business the way it is now, the studios would I assume they were making their movie trailers in-house because it was very typical that, you know, if John Williams is recording the score to Home Alone, you know, it's like early 90s, they would extract some of the score and put it in the trailer. And what you would see in the trailer would be literally the music from the film. And then there started to be this mid-period where like there's a composer named John Beal, for example, who made a whole living of this for quite a long time, where they would basically be hired by the trailer company to reconstruct the score because it might not be finished or it might not be like eligible, like for copyright or publisher purposes, to be used verbatim. And so someone would be recreating the score. And then at some point, trailer music started to just become its own thing. And you have like the heavy hitters in that world, like the really famous outfit is a production company called Two Steps from Hell, that do like the kind of Hans Zimmer style, just
Great
epic
name.
to the max. And they kind of essentially redefined the whole trailer music concept so that now that's its own genre. It's its own, you know, you can go on Spotify and find playlists of trailer music essentially that are hugely popular and it's composers who do nothing but that. Because they're so dialed into that kind of aesthetic. So speaking specifically then from my experience, like on John Wick Hex, that's actually on the first trailer, I essentially scored it. I basically just wrote the trailer music around kind of the blocks of the beats that were sort of being outlined in the storyboard and whatnot, if I remember correctly.
I think so. Yeah, I think you had like an early cut of it.
Or that's what it was. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah,
you made like a rough version and then send that to.
And then that let us refine the timing of the cut, kind of like traditional film scoring in that way. But that's very unusual. Most of the time, I'm just told, "Hey, you know, what do you think of this trailer?" And I didn't even know they were working on it. And it's usually music utterly unrelated to the score. I have no input on it whatsoever. And it's half the time it's like a pop song that's
what I was
just
going to say is I feel like a lot of video game trailers are licensed music a lot of the time.
Yep.
Yeah, like a lot of covers, right?
Yeah.
Covers in particular because they're cheaper. Because
they're cheaper because you don't have to pay the
song, not the
you still have to pay Austin, is this correct? You still have to pay the writers publishing, you don't have to pay the performers, right? Or the sync of mechanical.
the way you don't have to get permission also to do a cover. You just
Right.
basically pay and they can't stop you. So
which is what's led to the cliche, right, of the like moody cover of a pop song, because essentially you have all of that recognition.
Activision just keeps doing
it's
it.
cheaper. It's so clever though.
Ever since
the first person to do that must have like really been proud of
Oh
themselves.
yeah, their manager was like, "Nice work, you saved us this amount of money."
Someone got a slap on the back.
Yeah.
For that.
The one I could be wrong, but the one that I think broke the seal on that was when Michael Andrews, I think is his name. I'm blanking. But when they did the moody solo piano cover of Mad World for Donnie Darko. The very first Gears of War used that in their trailer, and it was like from that point forward, okay, this is all we're doing now. This is the default
and that
position.
cover, I think that cover went on to like be #1 in the UK that Christmas.
I'm sure,
which tells you everything you need to know about British people and our sense of humor. Of like, we're gonna make the most depressing movie ever. The most depressing song ever.
This is the first song that I learned on piano.
Really, Mad World?
The first like pop song that I learned on piano.
That's funny.
Because of that trailer. I love Gears of War.
All around me.
It's a fun song to play on piano and it's not too hard. But yeah, and then the Gears trailers, God, they were good. They were just so moody. I loved them so much.
But that was the thing. Circling it back to Dead Island, I remember thinking, why isn't the game this though? Like they're selling such a different experience that at some point you just have to recognize, like at some point people just learn the language basically and realize, okay, the trailer it's like a little short film that mentions the movie.
Is figuring out what about trailers is bullshit. And like that's an absolute thing at E3 where like on the fly, you know, we have these press conferences and then immediately afterwards it's like we saw these things, what do we think of them? And it is my job to be like, I don't think that game is going to be this. I think this marketing means this. And I think that one thing that's helped me a ton as a journalist is that I studied marketing in university. It was part of my degree. So I feel like it's super helpful that I can be like, well, they've done that for that reason, but I don't think this is going to turn out that way. The biggest problem with talking about this stuff when it comes to video games is that people are so set in what they want to hear. And I feel like that's a really like...
On the consumer side or on the marketing side?
On the consumer side. It's a really like complicated thing to navigate as media because I've spoken about this before with like Mass Effect Andromeda. I did it with Days Gone. It's like there are games that I can be like, I don't think this is going to be good, but people don't want to hear it. So you're caught in this weird space where you're like, well, I'm going to be honest no matter what, but the audience is going to hate me for being honest in this instance. So it's a really complicated thing to like, am I benefiting them by telling them that I don't think this game is going to be what they like? No Man's Sky was my biggest one. Then I was like, I don't think there's going to be anything to do on launch. I don't think people are going to be satisfied with this game. I'm not convinced. And someone started a petition to get me fired. And there's still a video where you can read all the comments of people being like, "Stupid bitch," and I went back to be after launch and replied.
I'm sure they
just
all
out of
came
pace.
and apologized though, Alanah.
Of course, they all apologized.
I'm sure
no, I really did go back on the comments in that video and be like, "Yeah." Huh?
To be fair, really? Alanah, I did take the petition down after we talked about it.
Thank you, because the game wasn't that good on launch, but holy shit, I love that game now.
What's so funny is that Worlds Adrift, I'm giving props to my buddy Imre for this, but I mean, Worlds Adrift was able to really accomplish what I think No Man's Sky set out to be. And I remember that first trailer correct me if I'm wrong, Alanah, but the first trailer they showed for No Man's Sky was at PSX, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that trailer and people stopping me in the hallway doing interviews and stuff are like, what do you think of No Man's Sky? I was like, if they pull off what that trailer was, it is no pun intended, a game changer. Because that just continuing to just zoom out. It was like, this is like Men in Black shit, where it was like, holy, we are such a microcosmic version of this, and this thing is going to be huge. But like Worlds Adrift, did you ever play Worlds Adrift?
No, but I've actually watched people play a lot of that game.
It is fascinating, and I remember being at Bossa Studios. Mike, I mean, that's in your neck of the woods. Do you know?
I was the first employee of Bossa Studios years ago. Yeah,
I always forget that. So did you see Worlds, or as Emre calls it, Worlds, which I think is hilarious. That a man who can't say the W.
No, I like Emre so much. I quit my job to go and follow him to London to be a Bossa. Yeah, no, I wasn't. No, that was after I left. Basically, Bossa made a lot of like social games and not great games, and then I quit because Thomas was alone, made money, and suddenly the quality of the games went up. I think we know why. Is the best thing that ever
you were the problem.
You were the
I was clearly all that was holding them back. Yeah, from greatness. But no, that's designed by Luke, who was a designer I hired. Yeah, he was the lead designer on that. It's an amazingly designed game, and the tech was impressive as well. Like in terms of what they were doing multiplayer with Improbable was phenomenal.
And I asked him, I was like, I remember them showing me, I was like, okay, so is this just like are you showing me a what's it called? If you're just kind of like a playthrough, but it's obviously all recorded, right? And they're like, no, we're actually we're opening up the lid right now and you can see inside what's happening. I was like, so all these people are playing? I was like, yeah, it goes. And at this time, like GTA 5 had just gone online. And one of the biggest problems were I would get online and my buddies that we were trying to be, we're all in different worlds, right? We're literally could be standing next to each other in the same place geographically on the map in GTA, but we were in completely different, servers had just gone, no, you're over here, you're over here, you're over
Yeah,
here.
man, Sky multiplayer on launch.
Yeah. So I asked Imre, I was like, how many worlds do you have? He was like, there's one world. And I went, yeah, I get that. But I mean, like server-wise, he goes, no. There's one world. And I went, how are you going to facilitate? So like one of the point of the game was like, use this coffee cup. If I set this coffee cup down in the game, the world would interact with that based upon, there was a dynamic weather system, and that cup would age, mold would grow on it. And if you came back, Alanah, 6 months later to exactly where I was, you would find this dynamic asset completely changed based upon how the world dictated. So, and then you could pick it up, and so every asset in the world was dynamic. I was like,
it was the Fable dream made real, basically. It was the stuff that everyone said about Fable very early on, kind of taken to its... But it was real as well, like the tech work.
I mean, Red Dead 2 does a lot of that, but that came out a lot more recently.
This was 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's nuts. Have you guys, anyone played Eve?
Eve Online?
Yeah.
I've not.
I have
I
not.
like reading about Eve Online.
That's what I was going to
I've never
say.
played it.
Mike nailed it. To me, I'm like the over the fence fan of Eve, because I think that it's as someone who was hopelessly addicted to EverQuest back in the day, and then just had to quit because I was like, I literally I have like a self-destructive.
Nice.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Wow.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want that.
Yeah.
It's really good.
You can't show porn on the
Did you
internet.
prepare that
show porn
earlier?
on the internet.
How did you know?
Say again, sorry?
How did you know we were going to
I
talk
did
about
not
this?
prepare that earlier. I happened to be sat
Just
next to the
happened.
game.
Thank God
waiting for my
Amazon
library
came to you in just enough time. The
It
post
looks
was
so-
just
it
delivered.
looks so, and I love these large scale events they do, and it's just like everything about it seems so perfect, and
It's
that's
incredible.
why I have to stay away.
Well, I tried to play it once and was like, I don't think I can do this, because I like to play a lot of video games. And that's why aside from
Exactly.
being addicted to MMOs, I just don't. I try not to, because I could just, then that would be all I would play, and then I would miss out on everything that I have to cover. But
Right, yeah.
Eve.
Does
like, just-
anybody remember there was an MMO that was I think it was called Entropia?
It sounds familiar.
It
It does
was
sound familiar.
either this was I thought it was actually live and you could actually play it, but there was an in-game currency, and this would have been like 9 years ago. There's an in-game currency that was fueled by actual dollars. So you could, but before loot crates and everything else was a thing, right? So Mike, you could, and there was commerce. So like Mike, you could have this one guy paid like $1 million or whatever for, or like let's say $250,000, whatever it was, $250,000 for a blueprint for the code to be able to build a spaceport. So in order to get
it's
to
every
this
it's every
planet,
game development studio's dream.
Yeah.
right? To be able to monetize that. And so
Yeah.
you could have factions, all throughout the game. You could do Rebel or Imperial Alliance, whatever. So Mike builds this spaceport and then charges people to go through it, right? So anytime you want to go to this planet, you have to pay a toll. So one of the rival factions, a saboteur, gets on board of the spaceport, and people like have set up shops. You could sell your art inside this spaceport. Like
No way.
he made his money back by just letting the place out. But there was a saboteur that got on and blew up the spaceport. And I was
Bold.
like,
That's some Eve shit.
what would you do? And he goes, this became a thought experiment with the group that we were talking about. He was like, I would kill the guy. I went, where? In the game or in real life?
'Cause it's
I
real
was
money.
like, you start really, and it's like, well, I guess you would have insurance. I was like, holy shit, you're creating, and I don't know if Eve does this to,
Yeah,
to
you're just
that
copy
level.
pasting the real world at that point. Like you're
Right?
you're not even like, what's the point of even doing it in the game? Like just build the real space station and do us
Yeah,
all a
it's easy.
favor.
But Eve has emerged because Eve's been around so long. It has built there is insurance. They're the one that I love, and I'm sure any Eve fan in the audience is going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Like it's probably the cliche thing, but there was a story about one there because you're rival corporations, where a corporation literally basically did real world espionage on
Yeah.
a different corporation. Did like social engineering and stuff so they could work. They had like spies in their corporation. They
Mhm.
basically waged a campaign for a couple of years to kind of infiltrate this rival corporation.
I think it was like almost
and get
a decade
just enough
in the
power
making.
that they could topple it. That's
Yeah.
why I bought the history book, because it's genuinely it's like reading actual history.
It absolutely
Basically
is. Is that
people
open
people
source,
and
though?
you
but
give
they are
them
doing
power
real
and-
things too, and like
Yeah.
I think it came out that like there was a politician who was a government official who was like doing illegal things in Eve, in that like
Really?
a real world politician who was basically like
I love that.
gaming the politics in Eve as well. Like that shit is nuts. It's so
Fantastic.
fascinating to read about, and I have so much respect for everyone who can actually put time into it, because it seems like a very obtuse game when you first actually look at it. It's extremely complex from like just what I've seen, but the stories
And like you
that
say,
come out of it-
massive investment of time and energy. Like, I don't want to like take part in any history, but I'd love to read it.
Yeah.
Like, that's my
Well,
feeling.
it's like
I-
the Final Fantasy
I'll be
MMO.
a
when it's
casual
15.
observer of the
Yeah.
atrocities of
Yeah.
time.
I'm not sure if it's still happening, but I know that in Final Fantasy 15, the basically the upper class, there are a finite amount of houses that you can buy on servers, and the upper class or the rich players have bought out all the houses, so the poor people just can't get homes
It's
now.
Elysia, man.
And people will
Jesus.
like post about it on Reddit and be like, "This is so unfair. Like, how are the rich just buying all the houses? Like, I'm a new place, so I just can't get a house now." And you're like, "Yeah, dude, that's how it works."
How did they not see that coming a mile away?
I was about to say
That-
that's why we play games, right? So we could do not escape the real world.
Yeah, like that's a but that seems like a very predictable problem.
Coming to
especially for a
PS5.
franchise
Possibly
Paying your
intentional. I've not
taxes.
read into it as much as I should have to be able to talk about it at length, but I can imagine that they did that on purpose to create conflict. But I think there are also complicated things where you can only get a certain amount of items if you have a home because you could store them there or something like that. But I mean, I'm having that with Animal Crossing right now, where like I'm just constantly in debt. And like,
What's the name of the little character, Miss Tom Nook?
Tom
is
Nook,
it?
yeah.
Or- yeah.
raccoon dog Tom Nook, who, to be fair, does give you interest-free loans.
He's a job creator.
He
He's a
is.
trickle down
Yes.
hero of
But he's also, some of it's so funny that a lot of people are playing this game that I have a memory of Animal Crossing being relaxing, but then playing this one, I'm like, fucking fish got away. Like, because there's so much shit that you have to manage and so many people that you have to try to make happy because you're trying to build an economy and you get rewards for spending money on the island rather than just repaying your loans because you need to be good to the economy. It's like all this stuff that I'm like,
Jesus.
I don't know if I even want to think about half of this right now. Can I
This
just
sounds like a job. This sounds
Yeah.
like running a company
Can I
to
just
me.
sit on
and
an
I don't-
island?
I don't want to do anymore.
Can you
Yeah.
die for the economy? Is that also an option to where you can just die so that the
We should do
economy could be
that.
better?
Yeah. Actually, we should die for
That would be the
economy.
heroic thing.
You
for your
should be
children,
willing
Troy,
to
for your
do that.
children.
Yeah. No, but-
I guess that's the thing. Right before we started this, or I was saying, I saw an article from someone about how like a lot of the hardcore long-term fans before this latest iteration feel like the vibe is really different, and all the social media. Especially because of everybody being at home right now, there's a huge amount of sharing of like, how does your island look? And there's this kind of meta competition that has emerged of people that are like, I just wanted to fuck around on my island and make it cool. And now I'm like, all my friends have way cooler shit than me. And I feel this kind of inherent pressure that never was, because the game was not as pervasive before, I guess.
Yeah, it's
never
maybe
thought about
become
this,
more
but-
competitive because of social media, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's basically someone saying like, I still love the game, but it's definitely not like it was because it's just so omnipresent that I feel this need to keep up.
I mean, I've been a
and-
little bit like that in that, like, I am more of a Doom person than an Animal Crossing person. So I shared a bunch of Doom shit and just kept talking about Doom and absolutely felt this wave of like, everyone's talking about Animal Crossing, Doom doesn't matter. And I was like, I will continue to tweet about Doom, damn you. But it's like,
Right.
you definitely picked the wrong game. They want to hear about Animal Crossing.
But I think
For us, that's a split in the household between Doom and Animal
Yeah.
Crossing. We've chosen our sides, and that's how it works.
I feel like that is kind of that's a transcendent truth. Like we move in 24-hour cycles, right? So everyone was talking about Tiger King, and then everyone switched over. Now everyone's talking about whatever it is now. Like you can almost feel. I almost feel sometimes like I'm like, man, I'm so far behind the curve because I didn't, interact
and checked
with this.
Twitter an hour ago.
Right, an hour ago. Because
Well, there
everything
was
has
something
changed.
that I found very interesting this week, as just like a culture study that's happened on social media, is at some point everyone decided April Fool's Day was canceled. Everyone decided that if you make an April Fool's Day joke, we're going to be mad at you. It didn't matter what the joke was. And I fully understand where it comes from too, because it's just, we don't need to give people things to be excited about and then call them fools right now. I completely get that. But it doesn't matter what it was, doesn't matter how you did it. We have collectively all decided that if you make an April Fool's joke, we are going to be angry at you. And I was like, it's just crazy to watch people decide this is the cause this week. If you do that, I'm on you. And it's like you're watching people just throw all their energy into this thing before it's even happened, knowing that if anyone does it, there's going to be a consequence. And so many people jumping on it that they're just like trying to get these tweets to get a ton of retweets because other people are doing it. It was like watching that happen.
And it's not like this is a week where all of the marketing teams who set these things in motion like weeks ago, they're all like struggling just like the rest of us, right? So they might not have the time or the resources to like to cancel whatever they were doing for April Fool's Day.
I know companies who have
genuinely
because of this stuff pulled their their April Fool's coverage down or refused to do it, like Google. And the employees who are working on that stuff are so devastated because they had something that was fun and silly that they were going to do that the internet decided they were not allowed to, no matter what it was. It was just, you're not allowed to.
Like you say, though, in a couple of hours, right? Like that decision was made by the collective.
Yeah. It was just really interesting to watch. Like, I feel like.
Plus, we're all so much more online right now, right, as well, which definitely plays into those kind of things.
Yeah, I think it speeds up that cycle a ton because everybody has a way more
Now what?
Yeah.
Do you know the etymology?
I can't stand the like outrage of the hour where it's never principled, or I shouldn't say never, but it's very often these things are like just because it catches fire and it achieves this critical mass where the social consequence of being a contrarian outweighs anything else. And so it's like well, I guess now it's going to depend on if Alanah and Troy agree with you. If I have to back down,
pick a side, guys. Pick a side.
Mike's right.
Thank you.
God damn it.
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of the time with social media, it's people jumping on causes that they don't necessarily care about a lot of the time to feel like they're doing something impactful. And I understand that too when so much of the internet is screaming into a void. And feeling like you aren't noticed. Like I understand both sides of that. And like yesterday I was arguing with people for hours because that's a thing that I've started doing more since quarantine is just replying to things I normally wouldn't and I shouldn't be. Like I caught myself yesterday. I was like, I need to stop. I just keep arguing with these people because
Why?
Because I'm at home. I think because I'm frustrated. It genuinely, if like I'm going to psychoanalyze myself, it's because my family's in Australia and I feel like the whole world is being pieces of shit when my stepdad and my dad have both had to go to hospital repeatedly for cancer. My dad had surgery last week. They didn't get all the cancer. So he has to go back in 4 weeks. And I'm like, if you fuckers keep walking around outside and my dad gets sick when he goes to hospital, I'm going to burn the world down. So I think that's what's happening is that I feel very angry at everyone. So I'm just arguing with people who, to be fair, arguing with me first. It's just that I'm engaging when I normally wouldn't. But yesterday
and that's the thing, right? That control that we all have to have as people who are public and, representing various different things.
Listen, I'm not doxing anyone.
That starts to chip away.
I'm mostly just arguing about stuff that I wouldn't. But yesterday I did it with... Yeah. I tweeted, I thought it was pretty harmless, that I felt like right now specifically is a bad time to release a 1 month timed exclusive game regarding the Modern Warfare 2 campaign coming to PlayStation 30 days before anywhere else. Because
you can't go out and buy a new console regardless.
Yeah, right? and I mean, it's like not a huge problem in that it's already on Xbox One because it's backwards compatible. But, this is a new thing and it's just right now specifically, I don't feel like we should be releasing timed exclusives, but they would have already signed a contract. It would have already been done. I said in the tweet, I know this is just business. But I just ended up getting into arguments with people about how it's good for PlayStation gamers actually, and it's like pro-consumer. And it was just like, I don't, like sometimes watching people defend companies blindly because it's part of their identity, even though it's not actually good for them and exclusives are not actually good for the public. They're only good for the people who make the hardware.
Dude, that's a political thing though too.
Whole thing.
The two, first of all, to comment briefly on that, there was nobody that was more excited about the Modern Warfare 2 remaster than me. I was like, holy shit, I can't believe this has been rumored for so long. It's finally doing it.
My favorite campaign, I think, in the series.
And I'm excited to play the campaign. However, that was not my favorite part of that game. I miss playing those maps, and I especially miss the Spec Ops missions. Like, I wanted so badly to do the sniper missions. Like, I was so looking forward to those sniper missions. It was a great thing that I could do with my friends, or it was something that I could do by myself that just was a small microcosmic version of that game that I could play very quickly. And the fact that they didn't support that, I totally understand. It's a big undertaking to try to go, we're not going to support this server wise, right? They're not going to delegate servers for people to go back and play Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer. And the Spec Ops is a very small thing. So we're not going to up-res all that. We're just simply going to focus on the campaign and put that out because we could do that very cheaply. I understand it. So I kind of like got my excitement level a little bit. But Alanah, for you, the question that I have is, I understand the reason why I engage and argue, and especially in a time right now where like you said, you want to have impact and you want to have control. I don't feel like I can control my world right now, but I can control this, or try seemingly control this conversation with 280 characters. Do you feel on the other side of it, especially because you are aware, and I really commend you and applaud you for being able to go, I'm doing this because of this, and this is my outlet. I'm not mad at the punching bag, but I do understand and make the connection that my level of frustration is somehow impacted by me putting this fist against this piece of plastic. Mm-hmm. Do you, on the other side of that argument, do you feel better? Do you go, okay, I've made my point about Doom to this asshat, chicken fucker 99 or whatever his person or her name was on Twitter. Do you feel better on the other side of it, or do you feel worse?
I don't want to answer. I think it might make me feel better, but I don't want that to be the answer. Because I do it in a small stint where I'll like argue with people on one tweet for 2 hours and then leave it. And it's also that the volume of negativity that I get as a woman with opinions on the internet is extremely high. So a lot of it I ignore all the time. And
even without an opinion, I've noticed, like even if when we're tagged in a tweet to you, I will just see a bunch of random shit. I'm like, if this is what she's getting on a
no, it's constant. It's like, I probably read like, I don't know, a few hundred negative comments a day, right? And I, for the most part, I'm like, don't care, whatever. But I feel like once you get a certain volume of that, not engaging in any of it is like, sometimes I just have to be allowed to stand up for myself. Like sometimes I just have to be allowed to do that. And I'll always get replies that are like, don't engage. That makes me more mad than whatever I'm engaging with usually, because I'm like, you have no idea what this is like. Like for people who deal with this stuff on a large scale, they have to have an outlet sometimes. And sometimes an outlet is just calling an idiot and then walking away. Like letting it all wash over you is just stressful. It's just a lot of pressure. And like at some points in time, I'm like, I just have to be able to tell someone when I think they've been a dickhead. And then I'll be like, it's done. All right, I'm good. And then walk away.
Do you feel like though, however, by engaging with it, and I have no opinion either way, which is the point of this, is that it's just opinion. But do you feel that by engaging that there is credibility that is given to that person or to their opinion?
I don't think about not really, but I do it for me more than I do it for the other person. So if I feel like I need to call someone an idiot sometimes, I'll do it. And, people will be like, well, if you give them attention, then maybe that's what they wanted. I'm like, I don't care what they wanted, because this is what I wanted. And I need to do something to feel better as well. If they're allowed to do it, I'm allowed to do it. But then it's also, people will say, well, if you do it once, won't people be more likely to do it? And that's not true, because there was one time I timed a literal month where I was like, I'm not going to engage in any negative comments. I got the exact same amount. It doesn't matter what I do. Sure. They throw it at me no matter what. So it basically is like my approach to dealing with massive amount of negativity on social media is literally what will make me be able to get through this. Because if I didn't engage in any of it, I'd probably be off social media by now, because I'd just be like, stop fucking policing everything I do. And sometimes I just have to yell at someone and be like, stop fucking policing everything I'm doing.
Last follow-up to that is, do you think that, let's say, okay, I don't, like you said, it's a very aware thing to go, I don't care what they're getting out of this. It's like, oh, good, they got their attention. Like that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this so that I can cathartically get rid of my shit and feel better on the other side. Do you think that person, the recipient of that on the other side, is better or worse, if I can frame it in that binary way, for that response?
50-50, because sometimes people will reach out to me afterwards. Like I get a lot of comments probably of people being like, hey, I was really awful to you several months ago and I'm sorry and I've never done it again. And I won't remember what they said, but it happens all the time. People like, I said some really bad shit about you and I learned from that experience. But then sometimes they just like lose their minds and feel vilified. And I think like part of that comes with if I reply to someone negatively, then 30 other people do, and then they don't expect it. And my argument with that has always been, well, if you're engaging with me then and saying something negative and I'm not allowed to reply, but you're allowed to say it, you should know when you're engaging with me, but that could happen. And that's the choice that you made when you said some shit to someone who has 400,000 followers.
Yeah.
So we're like 50% Spider-Man, 50% Jokers. That's what we're talking
pretty
about.
much, yeah. I try not to do it too much. I'm not going to recommend. I don't think that I'm particularly mean to anyone because all I ever do is I never call anyone names. I don't call on their profiles. I don't actually say anything about them. I will only ever argue with the individual thing that they have said, not anything personal. I don't do any of that. But sometimes it's just
you're all about the dry sarcasm and like snarky, detached.
Yeah, what
sort of like
last night, what did I say?
I would never want to debate with Alanah Pearce. I would never want to be in a situation where I had to be in opposition. You all are a person who's incredibly intelligent and whose opinions that are strong are equally informed. So you are
my boyfriend and I debate constantly on things, and that's a thing that I think is like
in a healthy way.
Yeah, really good.
Okay.
Like we would just have a conversation and we disagree on points, but we're both coming from different perspectives that are both educated. So I actually love doing it.
I want to debate you so hard right now.
It's
baby,
the point where like
when you
people
talk
are
to
aggressive or
me.
not willing to back down that it's a problem. And I don't think I'm generally stubborn about most things. There's some things that I will be stubborn on, like healthcare. But for the most part, I try not to be.
Right? Pro healthcare.
Yes,
I'm
and for
I'm
healthcare.
very for
Okay,
health.
so
Would
I'm
like
very
people
actually
anti.
advocating for a very social Darwinism.
But I mean, social media in general now is
also.
just like this weird. Like I feel like we're in a really strange landscape because everyone is online, and it's also even the conversation about coronavirus has changed a lot. In the beginning, I made a video about how a lot of games are probably going to get delayed because of it, and I got a lot of comments saying, like, how dare you talk about this, people are dying. That conversation has gone for some reason, and I suspect what happened is that, like, now you're allowed to talk about every aspect of it and nobody's mad. I feel like it was originally because it was so isolated, it was people virtue signaling a little bit, and now that everyone's dealing with it and it's a reality, people do want to understand every aspect of it.
Can you define
I think
that?
as well as someone who was quite kind of, I was one of the early nerds who was like the one in my group who was going on about this like before. I think.
Oh yeah.
Well, we did our first episode of a podcast where you
like
said to take it seriously, Mike, and there are so many podcasts that have been up where you have audio bites of people being like, "It's not a big deal. This is so dumb." And I'm like, "Thank God for Mike."
And that's it.
We didn't do that.
And I think that might be what's shifted genuinely is that people like me who were like, I said this to my girlfriend like about a week ago. It was when the lockdown happened in the UK. It was, obviously everyone was kind of it was a horrible moment and it's scary and all this stuff. And I was kind of happy. And it was this weird moment of like, no, I'm happy because everyone's taking this seriously now. I suddenly feel like I'm not a crazy person.
Right.
I suddenly feel like the world's kind of, and this isn't me kind of showing off or anything. It's more just kind of that there's a comfort from knowing that everyone else is now taking it seriously. I wonder if that's what you're describing comes from, Alanah, because maybe it was the people like me who were like, we stop talking about this nonsense. We've got to save the world.
Yeah.
And now I think because people like me are a bit calmer now because we know everyone's taking it seriously.
True.
Now it's maybe a bit more comfortable to start having those tangential
because it feels like the world is taking it seriously. Yeah, well, for the most part, it's still a lot.
You're no longer just I'm not Chicken Little anymore, and it actually feels quite nice to know that there's a consensus, to know that people are taking it seriously.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah,
the situation was
LA. I left the apartment for the first time in 2 weeks yesterday.
That's if I can encourage you. I was in the same place, and just getting outside and reminding myself there's still a sun in the sky, there's still clouds, there's still blue, and that was incredibly healthy for me. And I feel like the needle can go far the other way too. And what has been revealing for me about this situation is that I originally was like, all right, everybody calm down, because I can be a pragmatist, but I can also be a fairly buoyant optimist. And not go. It was such a culturally, I couldn't wrap my head around culturally. I'm no stranger to adversity and the atrocities of life and people dying. And I've lived through wars. I understand it, but it was the cultural impact. It was like, that happens in other countries. It doesn't happen here. It was very revelatory of how comfortable I had gotten in my own routine and my own cozy, white bread life. And Pam and I both have been like, no, we're going to be hardcore about this. And we have David, who's our assistant. And I was like, David, you can't be here. And it's hard to look at your 2-year-old son and go, I know you want Uncle D here, but he can't be here right now. And so we FaceTime with him. We've made hard lines, and some of our neighbors look at us like we're crazy because we're like, hey man, I'm sorry, we can talk across the street. But we're really taking this seriously because we know people that are in the healthcare system and we know what they're doing. And somebody put up that wonderful video of like, let me show you what it looks like for this guy to go to work, and the amount of precautions and measures that they take to not only keep themselves from getting sick, but from preventing other people from getting sick. And
don't throw away their hard work, basically.
Yeah, they put things on their face, and it's the mask, and it's the duct tape, then it's the shield, then it's the taping this whole thing up. And then all the stupid thought that occupied my brain is like, dude, what if you have to go to the bathroom? Like, that sucks to have to go through all of that. So then you think is like, we only have one of these per day. Like, so many of those healthcare people only have one mask, and they only have one gown. So it's like, you hold it, motherfucker, all day long. And I'm bored. No, my job is to stay home right now. Yeah. That's what I can do. So it was a big wake up call. And Mike, you were, so I was like, all right, everybody calm down. It's like, no.
I remember the conversation. I remember being a bit frustrated by the conversation, if I'm honest.
No, I dude, this has been our relationship.
I get where you're coming from.
Sure.
And it's scary. I think the optimistic thing for me in all this, what I like to think of in this, is I wonder if as a society we're learning how to solve problems that are very big. I feel like humanity is not designed to deal with kind of big existential threats very often. We're not very good at it. And our generation, like you say, the wars have been far away, or there's been a distancing that's happened.
We can change the channel.
Feeling like, especially as I do about kind of environmental stuff and kind of those problems that are coming down the road, I wonder if this is to an extent like a rehearsal, if we're all going to learn a lot about how to deal with problems that are much bigger than us and our neighbors, and we're going to start to actually understand how society works at a bigger level. I think maybe that's the lesson in this, and I think that's what I try and remind myself of.
We do feel unified in a way that I feel like I haven't seen before,
right?
Because we see how connected we are. It's like, this person came from this place and went over to this place and infected everything just by the nature of doing their normal life.
This is what Ozymandias wanted with the squid. This is what he was going for. So watch
Ozymandias?
Yeah. This is what he was trying to make happen. It was him.
God.
Do you know what's great is literally Carrie, my girlfriend, turned to me and said that as we were walking down the street the other day. She's like, this was what the squid was about.
This is absolutely what the squid was about.
Yeah.
Just trying to make this exact thing happen.
Give me your I'm curious your take on this, because for me, it's interesting how in one way things feel united, but also things through another lens to me feel in far more intensively polarized and ideological, because the mayor of LA put out an announcement that as part of their effort to keep people at home and to just do their part, they said, we are going to shut off water and power to businesses we deem non-essential in the city of LA. And privately, that really pissed me off, because I thought, first off, that's a very like, if your goal is to try to calm people down and reassure them and sort of do that aspect of leadership, big fail there. But I also understand the need for a slightly draconian even approach on the part of certain leaders, and I don't like, in total resonance with everything that you're saying, especially Troy, about like, let's take this seriously. Totally support that, and I obviously, I think no one, you won't find any disagreement from me. The thing but I shared that article on the kind of press release online, and I said, for a population full of people that are scared, how is this a helpful measure? Especially because aren't there like security alarms and shit that are tied in with these? This was such an ill conceived press announcement. All I was saying is, does this feel like a good strategy? Also, side note, I don't work from home. I don't have to interact with a single human being to come to my studio. It's such a short, my car I could walk it first off, but I don't even need to do that. It's such a short distance. I have months worth of gas in my car necessary to make that drive. Like, I felt somewhat clearly my business would be considered non-essential, but it's a big undertaking to move all my shit home. And to what end? Like, I get
there might as well
that
be
I
a
would be an
tunnel from your
outlier.
house to your office. Like,
I get that, I can't complain if I'm an outlier, and it just because it applies to me in this esoteric way, it's not going to apply to everyone else. I have total sympathy for that. But the only reason I'm bringing this up is not to hash that out. But I wrote online, like, surely I don't count as essential, but does that mean I'm just screwed? I'm just curious. Basically, to me, it's a dispassionate, open question. And the amount of vitriol I got from people that were like, "Stay the fuck home, you selfish asshole!" And like,
I think that's why they've done it, is not to calm people down. It's for people who aren't like you, who aren't causing problems, who are still going to work and not caring. I would guess that like the reason they've done that is not to make people calm. It's because
It's
they're
the spring
asking
breakers.
fucking people outdoors.
I get that. I just didn't understand.
Odyssey on this.
I just didn't understand why I got attacked by friends of mine, even like people that I've known for years, who came after me as if I was just advocating murder. I was like, it was bizarre to me, where I thought this has become ideological in a way that is bizarre to me, because this is effective.
I think that's a really interesting cultural difference that I've discussed with like American friends over the last few weeks. Is I think, and I'm treading very carefully here because I want to get this right, but I think that there is a big cultural difference between Europe and America on this stuff. And I'm not saying there are lots of examples where we've gone wrong with all of this throughout. America has solved its problems.
You're not Europe anymore, by the way. So you're not Europe anymore, actually.
Not Europe anymore. I don't know. I think we might be Europe. I don't know. I feel like
for this,
I feel very European right now. I feel like we should be. I guess my point is, America has solved its problems rightly. Some of those problems, by the way, were British. Many of them through freedom and independence and individualism, but not meanness, but just knowing to going for it and having individual liberty, shall we say, for all.
Yeah, almost isolationism. I feel
like there's
actually
a history in Europe and the UK of like, we're very used to, and it's culturally ingrained in a way that we're very used to kind of keep calm and carry on. I mean, that the history of that sign, I don't know if you guys know that was literally a sign that was manufactured for the occurrence of if we were invaded by Nazi Germany. It was a sign that was going to be put up because, just to keep calm and carry on in the face of Nazi oppression. That's the British kind of attitude. And
that was the origin of that?
That's the origin. They were posters that were made up and they were ready in a warehouse, in a stock room. The presumption was that was
blows my mind.
But I think there's a cultural kind of.
I just love the Churchill, like those ads for the Gary Oldman. It's like, you don't reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. But if they win, keep calm and carry on.
But I think that's the cultural. There was, the Nazis had our numbers. The Nazis, there are books that they planned out the invasion of the UK, and they essentially their notes on the UK was Britain will fold in an hour. Basically, if they've still got the royal family in place, then they'll just go along and they'll be kind.
Very quickly,
fine.
Do you remember there was a terrible fog that I think took place, and someone came to Churchill and said, "Do you understand that the loss of life that will happen?" And it was a catastrophic number. Do you know the story that I'm talking about?
It's ringing a bell, but carry on.
But it was someone came to us like, "Do you understand that it shut the city down? Like, it was so bad that the ships couldn't come in, and people were told to stay home, and that the loss of life was going to be something like 150,000. It was just terrible. And Churchill knew going in that this is what it was going to take." And he was like, "This is what it means to be prime minister, is that I'm going to have to own this decision, and that I'm doing everything that I can to just keep this train moving forward." But he had to shut the city down before, and there was still a tremendous loss of life.
It's horrific. But I think there's, and I do remember that, but I think there's Yeah, I think I don't basically, to come back to what Austin was saying, I think the point I'm making is that I feel like the ideological debate is a very particular to America one. I don't hear that happening over here. I think here the discussion is, should we just carry on? Because for many British kind of successes in these kind of situations, it's been about just going about your life. Don't let the terrorists win as a mentality, right? And that really doesn't work against disease. So that's the debate here, is like, do we go on with normal life or do we stop? But it's not born out of the kind of the government shouldn't tell me what to do kind of discussion. So I feel like it's a very polarized issue specific to the politics of America right now.
I think I would agree with that. I think the Australian stance would be more like the European one in this instance. The cultures are very different there. We have to let Troy go.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I'm going to title this episode.
Oh my God, so good.
This has been a ramble, hasn't it? Like,
I would also push, Austin, you and I could talk offline, pushing against that definition of, or the invocation of the word stoicism for that. I would say that that's not stoicism, but
I could be using it wrong also.
Well, not likely. Not knowing you, you're far too intelligent.
No, I mean that earnestly. I mean, sometimes I just get something in my head the wrong way, and it takes 5 years of me doing it wrong before somebody's like, that's really not what that means.
We'll see.
I don't know what to suggest calling this, but it is Troy's birthday. We should acknowledge.
That is true.
Is your birthday today?
Oh,
yeah, today's
Happy birthday, Troy.
That is not. I wouldn't want to make anybody mad. That is not an April Fool's joke. Yeah, 44, man.
Young.
44 on the floor.
Well, happy birthday.
44? Is that what you said?
44. Yeah, man. 44.
For palindromic.
It is. I mean, not if you actually spelled it out, then it would be like rof. But I mean, that's not really.
Yeah, Mike, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Call myself a writer. Don't know.
Happy birthday. Hope you have a good day. Sorry, this was a rambly one. I feel like I needed it though, so thank you. The last few days have been tough, and I feel like part of it is that I'm struggling with continuing to make content for Funhouse, and I'm trying to make more on my personal channel to give people a release. And in all of that, I am avoiding talking about anything negative because I feel like I'm trying to give people an escape. And I think that's doing my head in, is that I'm just like, nope, I'm just going to talk about things that let people like just think about video games for an hour. And I think the fact that I'm doing that and just ignoring problems so other people don't have to hear problems is absolutely having an effect on me in some weird way. So I appreciate talking about problems. I needed that this week.
Well, let's call this episode the Festivus airing of grievances then. And,
who cares about titles? What matter? YouTube, who cares? SEO and that.
What I love also, though, by the way, is that you, Alanah, have a great pitch for us to talk about that now I think 3 episodes in a row, we've not touched it.
God.
What?
I love that.
It's going to be great when we get there next week.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we'll save it. We'll save it.
Teaser, but it's so true. I love that we've managed to, anyway. Well, happy birthday, Troy.
Happy birthday, Troy.
Yeah, happy birthday, Troy.
Please don't neglect your outlet of toxicity, Alanah. Because I say that because I relate deeply to that, because like Troy, I also am a pretty optimistic person, but I have had periods in my life where it was really bad. And also on a micro level, like you store that shit like venom if you don't have a way to kind of release the pressure
totally
valve.
Yeah, I think for the most part I deal with it super well and I'm totally fine and like everything's okay. It's just this past week is just I've just been like shut the fuck up. And I think it is in very large part because my dad's been in hospital with cancer, and I'm like, maybe I should just not be on the internet while I'm dealing with that from another country that I can't leave. Don't know. Shout out to my dad. Love you. I hope you're okay.
Well, let's
please get better.
Send him all our well wishing and love.
Thank you. I think he's gonna be all right.
Soldiering through it.
Yeah.
Good.
Cancer sucks, but
cancer sucks. Fuck cancer.
Really
yeah, he's
fuck cancer. Fuck coronavirus.
Yeah, man.
All of it, and bless video games. Also, I've been watching the McDonald's documentary series on HBO. I think it's called.
That is so good, McMillions, right?
Good shit.
Yeah.
Good shit. It's very interesting. Shout out to that.
Very cool. That's a good.
Also, we have Final Fantasy and Resident Evil 3. Very hot. Coming out this week / next week. So I'm excited about both of those two.
I can't wait for next week.
Yeah, should be fun.
When we finally talk about what Alanah's been wanting to talk about.
I know.
You think? Maybe. It's positive.
Maybe, we'll see.
All right. Happy birthday, Troy. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.